The Moscow air is thick with the scent of diesel and the weight of history. Inside a lavishly appointed hall, far from the grit of the city streets, a ceremony is underway. Men in decorated military uniforms and dark, well-tailored suits applaud politely. On a small stage, a familiar figure stands uncomfortably under the lights. He is immense, a mountain of a man draped in black silk. The iconic ponytail is gone, replaced by a severe graying haircut and a dyed goatee that does little to hide his age. He bows stiffly, accepting a minor state medal for strengthening international cultural ties. This is Steven Seagal. He is 73 years old, a citizen of the Russian Federation, a special envoy for the Kremlin, and a ghost of a former life. To a generation, he was the embodiment of untouchable American cool, a cinematic force of nature. Now, he is a cultural artifact, repurposed and displayed in a foreign land. How does a man travel from being the king of Hollywood action to a propaganda piece in Putin's Russia? The journey is not a simple rise and fall. It is a labyrinthine saga of myth-making, hubris, moral collapse, and a desperate search for a stage, any stage that would still accommodate his self-created legend. This is the story of that journey. Before the whisper-quiet delivery and the bone-snapping wrist locks graced the silver screen, there was a young man from Lansing, Michigan, with an ambition that burned hotter than any dojo furnace. Steven Seagal's origin story, as he told it, was always shrouded in mystique. It truly began not in America, but in Japan in the early 1970s. There, he immersed himself in the world of martial arts, marrying Miyako Fujitani, the daughter of an Aikido master, and eventually running her family's dojo in Osaka. This period was crucial. It was not just about learning a martial art, it was about constructing an identity. Seagal became the gaijin, foreigner, who had mastered the esoteric secrets of the East. He was disciplined, focused, and, by all accounts, a highly skilled and formidable Aikido practitioner, eventually achieving the rank of 7th Dan. He learned to cultivate an aura of quiet danger, of knowledge withheld. He wasn't just a fighter. He was a warrior philosopher, a narrative he would carry with him for the rest of his life. He was building the character of Steven Seagal long before a camera ever rolled. His return to the United States was the story's catalyst. He set up an Aikido dojo in California, and his reputation began to ripple through Hollywood circles. The legend of the real-deal martial artist reached the ears of Michael Ovitz, then the most powerful talent agent in the world. Ovitz saw something unique in Seagal. In an era dominated by the cartoonish musculature of Schwarzenegger and the everyman grit of Stallone, Seagal offered something different, a promise of brutal authenticity. Ovitz didn't just see an actor, he saw a brand. The result was Above the Law, 1988. The film was a raw, visceral hit, and it established the Seagal formula overnight. He was Nico Toscani, a stoic Chicago cop with a mysterious past, elite martial arts skills, and a strong, if simplistic, moral code. His fighting style was revolutionary for mainstream American cinema. It wasn't about flashy kicks or dramatic poses. It was about brutal efficiency, joint locks, throws, and swift, decisive strikes that felt terrifyingly real. Audiences were captivated. The golden age had begun. Hard to Kill, Marked for Death, and Out for Justice followed in quick succession, each film cementing his persona. He was always the apex predator, never the underdog. He didn't struggle. He punished. His characters, Mason Storm, John Hatcher, Gino Felino, were interchangeable vessels for the one true character, Steven Seagal. His signature look, the severe ponytail, the leather duster or silk jacket, the emotionless gaze, became iconic. He reached his commercial zenith with Under Siege, 1992. Playing Casey Ryback, an ex-Navy SEAL cook who takes on terrorists aboard a battleship, Seagal became one of the biggest movie stars on the planet. The film was a critical and commercial blockbuster, earning 2 Oscar nominations. For a brief, shining moment, Steven Seagal was invincible. His self-created myth affirmed by global stardom and tens of millions of dollars. Hubris is the shadow that follows success, and Seagal's shadow grew to eclipse his formidable frame. The invincible warrior on screen began to manifest as an insufferable tyrant on set. The whispers that had followed him for years grew into a roar of documented accounts. Co-stars and crew members began to speak out. John Leguizamo, his co-star on Executive Decision, recounted how Seagal, believing he was the real star, elbowed him violently against a wall for simply laughing at one of his pronouncements. The most infamous anecdote involved the legendary martial artist and stuntman Gene LeBell. During a friendly sparring session on the set of Out for Justice, Seagal claimed that his Aikido techniques made him immune to being choked out. LeBell, a judo and wrestling master, allegedly took him up on the offer, putting Seagal in a chokehold that rendered him unconscious and resulted in a rather embarrassing biological accident. While Seagal denies the story, it became a staple of Hollywood lore, a perfect metaphor for his own myth being choked out by reality. His ego began to poison his work. In 1994, he directed and starred in On Deadly Ground, an environmental passion project that was, in reality, a vanity project of epic proportions. The film was a mess of clumsy action and preachy monologues, culminating in a cringe-inducing 4-minute speech delivered by Seagal directly to the camera about the evils of oil companies. The film bombed, and audiences who came for bone-crunching action left feeling like they'd been lectured. It was the first major crack in his box office armor. The decline accelerated. The movies grew more formulaic and less successful. The world was changing, but Seagal wasn't. While franchises like Mission Impossible and The Matrix were reinventing action for a new generation, Seagal was still the same ponytailed Avenger in a leather coat, a formula that now felt dated and repetitive. He sleepwalked through films like The Glimmer Man and Fire Down Below, his performances becoming parodies of his former self. Then came the descent into direct-to-video purgatory. For most of the 2000s and 2010s, he churned out a succession of cheap, uninspired action films, often shot in Eastern Europe. In these movies, he was frequently overweight, visibly disinterested, and his fight scenes were often performed by body doubles with quick cuts, hiding his lack of mobility. The invincible warrior had become a caricature. Running parallel to his professional decline was a far more disturbing moral collapse. The whispers of inappropriate behavior evolved into a long and chilling list of public accusations of sexual harassment and assault. Jenny McCarthy claimed he demanded she undress during a 1995 audition. Portia de Rossi recounted a similar story from a final callback. Ray Dawn Chong called him a bully with a history of tormenting female co-stars. During the Dabur Me Too movement, more women, including actress Regina Simons, came forward with harrowing allegations of sexual assault dating back decades. A 1996 lawsuit filed by his former assistants alleged he had treated them as his sex toys. The case was settled out of court, but the damage was done. The man who had built a billion-dollar brand on the image of a protector of the innocent was now irrevocably tainted by accusations of being a predator. The myth had not just cracked, it had shattered. Hollywood, which tolerates many vices, has little patience for a star who is both a financial liability and a moral pariah. The doors, once held open by the most powerful men in the industry, were now firmly shut. For a man whose entire identity was fused with his public persona, irrelevance was a fate worse than death. The years following his Hollywood exile were a series of bizarre attempts to find a new stage. There was Steven Seagal's Lightning Bolt, an energy drink that promised the power of the dragon. There was his blues music career, which saw him touring with his band, Thunderbox, earnestly playing guitar to confused audiences. And most surreally, there was the reality show, Steven Seagal, Lawman, which followed him as a real-life, albeit reservist, sheriff's deputy in Louisiana. Each venture was an attempt to reclaim the authenticity he had lost, to prove that the myth was still real. But these were sideshows. His true reinvention, his final and most shocking act, was taking place on the global stage. As the West turned its back on him, Seagal turned his gaze east. He found a powerful and receptive audience in the corridors of the Kremlin. His courtship with Russia was a gradual, deliberate process. He began to praise President Vladimir Putin, another leader who cultivated an image of masculine strength and martial prowess. Seagal saw in Putin, the stoic judoka, a reflection of his own warrior ethos. The Kremlin, in turn, saw immense value in Seagal. He was a famous American, a symbol, albeit a faded one, of the very culture Russia sought to challenge. Having him in their corner was a propaganda coup. He could be used to soften Russia's image abroad and validate its policies to a domestic audience. It was a bizarre, symbiotic relationship between a fading star and a rising authoritarian power. He became a frequent visitor to Russia, buddying up with Chechen strongman Ramzan Kadyrov and loudly defending Russia's foreign policy, including the 2014 annexation of Crimea, where he performed a concert for pro-Russian separatists. In 2016, his journey reached its logical conclusion. In a televised ceremony, Vladimir Putin personally presented him with a Russian passport, granting him citizenship. The man who played the all-American hero Casey Ryback was now a citizen of Russia. The transformation was not yet complete. In 2018, the Russian Foreign Ministry appointed him as a special representative on Russian-American humanitarian ties. The title was nebulous, the role largely symbolic, but it was official. He was no longer just a celebrity friend of the regime. He was now a part of its diplomatic apparatus. After the 2022 invasion of Ukraine, Seagal's role as a Kremlin mouthpiece became even more pronounced. He visited the occupied Donbass region, was filmed at the site of a prison where Ukrainian POWs had been killed, towing the Russian line that Ukraine had shelled its own soldiers, and used his platform to parrot Kremlin talking points about Nazis in Ukraine. Which brings us back to that Moscow hall in August of 2025. The medal is pinned. The polite applause fades. Steven Seagal, the Russian envoy, steps off the stage and is absorbed back into a crowd of officials. He is a fixture now, a strange but accepted part of the Moscow elite. His life is a routine of state-sponsored events, interviews on RT, and carefully managed appearances that serve the interests of his adopted homeland. What is his legacy? It is a complex and cautionary tale. In America, he is remembered by some with nostalgia for a simpler era of action movies, but that memory is forever stained by his controversies and his ultimate defection. He is seen as a joke, a cautionary tale about ego, or more darkly, as a predator who escaped true accountability. In Russia, he is something else entirely. He is a symbol. He is the good American who saw the truth. He is a living, breathing piece of anti-Western propaganda. He provides a comforting narrative for the Russian state, that their values are so powerful, they can even win over a Hollywood icon. He is useful, and for a man who has craved relevance his entire life, being useful is everything. The ultimate tragedy of Steven Seagal is not that his career fell apart, but that he was unable to distinguish the man from the myth. He built his identity on the character of an invincible, all-knowing warrior, and when the world stopped believing in that character, he refused to let it go. He simply sought out a new audience, a new patron, who would continue to applaud the performance. He didn't just play a hero with a mysterious past and questionable government ties. He became a man with a mysterious present and undeniable ties to a foreign authoritarian government. The final bitter irony is that in his desperate attempt to remain the master of his own story, he became a character in someone else's. The shadow warrior who once moved with such lethal grace through the celluloid jungles of Hollywood now shuffles through the gilded cages of Moscow, a ghost of his former self, forever trapped in his final, strangest role.